the base. Okay. Dr. Helgman. What if someone makes a Kiddushin, Almanas that he's a Kohen? V'nimsa Levi, and it turns out that he's a Levi. Or Levi v'nimsa Kohen. Or he said he's a Levi and he's really a Kohen. Or in a sin v'nimsa Mamzer, or Mamzer v'nimsa the sin. Or Ben Ir v'nimsa Ben Krach. He said he lived in a regular city, and it turns out he lives in a big metropolis. Rashi explains that living in a big metropolis is very hard because it's a very busy place and it's expensive and it's squishy. It's not geschmack. Not geschmack. Or Ben Krach v'nimsa Ben Ir. There it's a Maila. Or Amunah Shabesi Karvel Merchatz v'nimsa Rochai. He said, my house is close to the Merchatz. It's convenient. Or Rochai v'nimsa Karv. Or Amunah Sheyesh Loi Bas. And if you remember, we discussed yesterday if this is Shvach Mamoin or if it's Shvach Yuchsin, maybe it means he doesn't want a yent in his house. She doesn't want a yent in her house. Or Amanash she'ein loy v'yesh loy. Or Amanash she'ein loy banim v'yesh loy banim. Or Amanash she'yesh loy v'ein loy. U'v'chulan, in all these cases where it's not a good Kiddushin, Afa pi she'amra b'libi hoyo li'skadesh loy. Alpha Pekin, really, yes, he said that he was a Kohen, and he ended up being a Levi. But in my heart of hearts, I didn't really care. I would have I wanted to take him anyway, even without a snai. Nevertheless, Eina Mekudeshi, she won't be Mekudeshes. And it works the same way if there was an assumption that we knew that he made that wasn't true. Who gathered his oven on Nichse, Adaita Lamesak L'Eretz Yisrael. Someone sold everything that he owns. Why? Because he was planning to move to Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, he was liquidating all of his assets that he had in Chutz La'aretz. But he didn't speak out that was his intention, but it was pretty obvious. So the halacha is Amar have a dvarim shabalav. This that he only sold because he wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael, that's dvarim shabalav. That's contradicting his actions. His actions state, I want to sell irrevocably. But in his heart, he might have only wanted to sell because he was moving to Yisrael. The lach is einam dvarim. They don't count. Zokt Gemara, we know l'ravaha. How does Rava know this halacha? But before we do this, Gemara, there's a very important tosfos that we need to learn. Dvarim shablev and dvarim. Mashma dafka mishum shloi pirish dvarim. It's mashma. The whole problem is he didn't say, I'm only selling because I'm moving to Yisrael. Avol pirish dvarim lahedja v'amar b'shas hamecher shu moichram lefi shu roi to l'leches l'eretz Yisrael. What if he would have told the buyer, I'm selling this to you because I want to move to Eretz Yisrael? Then it's mashma from our Gemara, hava mecher bot. The mecher would be bot. Frek Gemara, even if he spoke out that I'm only selling this property because I'm moving to Eretz Yisrael, it still shouldn't have any impact at all. Because shahamai hava inan t'nai kofel. Don't we have a rule that you need to make a t'nai kofel? So who cares if he expressed why he was selling? It still wouldn't have made a difference because without a t'nai kofel, anyway the mecher is kaim. And he didn't make a t'nai kofel. Shim lo yelech lo yiskayim hamecha. He didn't make the t'nai kofel that if I don't go, I'm selling because I'm going. But if I don't go, I don't want to make a miskayim. He didn't do that. If he was just megala daita. The Rashbam taught us in Sukkah that when you give somebody an esrik, amanas lahachser, because the first day of Yom Tov has to be lachem, when you gave it to somebody, amanas lahachser, you didn't make a t'nai kofel. So the Rashbam says, that's only the gate to have a t'nai kofel if it's a davar shel iser, like Kiddushin, Chen Beget, Aston Shmuel Begida, the Shchivera. But when it comes to financial transactions, that was the finish of the Rashbam. It doesn't make sense. The Chol Tnai, where do we know the halachas of Tnai from? Yafinim if they got up their way. There was Mammon who was splitting up the land. You have to make three categories. There are things that don't need a Tnai Kofel. We just need to know that this is what he's thinking. Why? Why don't we need a Tnai? Because we could be able to clear there's numdana that he only did it under these circumstances. The gam yesh devar, and he even let us know it. He spoke it out, even though he didn't make the Tnai Kofel. I'm sorry, period. He has to speak it out. If he speaks it out, it's good enough. It's clear enough without the Tnai Kofel. And then the gam yesh devar is a third category. You don't even have to say, because it's so obvious and clear. Someone who gave away all of his nechosim, and then the shama sheyesh loy ben, and then he heard that he had a son that he never knew about. There, shamatana b'teila, because there's such a strong omnina that someone's not going to give away all of his nechosim to a third party if he has children. He doesn't really mean to give it in the chasam. He just wants to make her in charge of distributing them. We should know because we are 100% sure. So to hear, if he spoke out that he was planning to go to Israel, we have it in Antzadi. And therefore, it's not from Shabbat anymore because he said something and he doesn't need it now. Zog to Gemara, how does Rava know that Dvarim Shabbat will have a Dvar? Maybe it's from this pasuk. It says Yakriv Oisa, and the pasuk is talking about Kabbanis, and it says if someone brings an oila, Yakriv Oisa. It's repeated Yakriv Oisa a second time. We learn from there Melamed Shekoyfen Oisa. If he made a commitment to make a carbon, he made a nether, and he didn't bring it, we force him to bring the carbon. Yochel Bal Karcha, you might think you force him. The pasuk says that the carbon is brought l'tzaynai. So how can it be forced and l'tzaynai? Okay, so you force him until he says he wants to do it. How could that possibly work? We know in his heart he doesn't want. You're forcing him. So it's Dvarim Shabbalef. His Dvarim Shabbalef says he doesn't want it. Even though he's saying right, honey, we know he doesn't want it. Elolah, what are you forced to say? You should be reading Dvarim Shabbalef and Indor. It must be that even though in his heart we know that he doesn't want the carbon, since he said right, honey, we ignore his Dvarim Shabbalef. So you have a raya from here that Dvarim Shabbalef and Indor. So there's no raya. Maybe there's an Anan Sahadi. As Toshva said, when there's an Anan Sahadi, when it's so clear, like when someone gives his nechasim away because he doesn't realize they has children, it's an Anan Sahadi, we don't even need him to speak it out. That had he known he had children, he would never give away his nechasim. So too over here, we know without any doubt that he wants to do the Ratzon Hashem. Elam Seifa, maybe we can bring a raya that Dvarim Shabbalef and then Dvarim from the Seifa. It says where the Rabbanan held that he needs to give a get. So sometimes we convince him a little bit with a little bit of encouragement. You force him till he says Roitzani. Right? There's a Rav in New York who went to jail because of the mitzvah of Roitzani. He used to convince them you putting cattle prods that shocked sensitive parts of the body. That was an argument to convince the fellow to be willing to give the get. We know he doesn't want to give the get. He doesn't want to give the get. His words might be saying Roitzani, but in his heart he definitely doesn't want to. There's no question of kapara. It must be that since he spoke out Roitzani, even though in his heart we know he doesn't want, but it doesn't count. That's not a raya. Maybe there, a person wants to be Mekayim the mitzvahs, so he wants to be Mekayim the words of Bez. But once again, There's an Natadi there, but in the regular it's without an Natadi. Maybe Dvarim Shabbat is having Dvarim. Rabbi Yosef Mehacha. A Mekadosh says if someone is Mekadosh a woman, the Arman he says, Kisover Hayisi Sheikenes. I thought she was a Kohenes. Parei Levia. It turns out she's a Levia. Or Levia, I thought she was a Levia of an Imtes Kohenes. Or Aniya, I thought she was poor. Parei Ashira, she's wealthy. Or Ashira very Aniya. The law is Mikudeshes. Why? If they Shaloi she didn't say I was that, and he didn't make etnai, I'm only marrying you because of that. After the fact, he's saying, "Oh, I thought she was something else." The Allah is it's Mugudeshes because she didn't follow, she didn't fool him. But Frank to Gemara Vamai, Haka Omer Kisavar Yisi. He's telling us now that he only did the Kiddushin when he said I read Mikudeshesly. It was with the assumption, thinking that she was a Kohenes. So why is that thought not valid to disqualify the Kiddushin? Must be a right that Dvarim Shabalav Einam Dvarim, and that's why we can ignore what his thought was, and we can assume that it's a good Kiddushin. Amar Le'abai, you don't have a right from there. Who said over there that it's a Vada Kiddushin? Maybe we're just machmer because of a Sofages Ashish, we're machmer to require a get. But you don't have a right from there that Bibridus, Dvarim Shabalav, Einam Dvarim. In all of these cases, our Mishnah says, where he said, I'm an Ashani Kohen, and he was a Levi, it's not a good Kiddushin. Mishnah, even if she says, I don't care if he's a Kohen, I want to be married to him anyway, Dr. Mishnah doesn't work. How about Pekin and the Mukudeshes? So you might ask in our Mishnah, Haka Amra, believe me, she's telling us loud and clear that even though he made it tonight, at the time when I was Makabal Kiddushin, I didn't care. Haka Amra, believe you. Dr. Gemara, so you have a raya for me, the Dvarim Shabbalah Veinam Dvarim. Dr. Gemara, there's no raya. The Dil Mashani Hasam, the Kiva the Asne, there it's not dumb, she had that assumption. He spoke out Beferish, Al Manash Anikoyin. So when he spoke out Beferish, Al Manash Anikoyin, Lav Kol Kamino, she can't uproot his Tanai because she didn't care about it. She would have had to speak out. No, I don't want your Tanai because I want to marry you even though you're not a Kohen. She didn't do that. Therefore, it's not a good Kiddushin. But in a regular case, maybe Dvarim Shabalav Havin Dvarim. I'll tell you where we know this from. Uvdal Hava Reb Chisda. Somebody asked this to Reb Chisda and he didn't know. Reb Chisda Berafuna. So Reb Chisda went to discuss it in the Beis Medrash of Reb Huna. They finally find a source that Dvarim Shabalav Einam Dvarim. And what was the source? If someone told the shliach, we know there's a halacha when it comes to me'ilah that if Reuven asks Shimon to do something for him, go get me money from that closet and buy me something with it. So the halacha is, if the shliach does exactly the shlichus that the mishalech sent him for, then the shliach mo. If you remember, that was one of the examples of yesh shliach with varaver. So I will shlucher havli min achaloin, oy min ad luskma, behavi loy. And in fact, the shliach did his shlichus. Even if the Balabai says there are two little bags of money there, I didn't mean the one that you took. I meant you should take the other bag. But when he originally said to shliach, he just said take it from the chaloin. He didn't say take it from the right side of the chaloin or the left side of the chaloin. He said from the chaloin. So his word said any bag of money that you're going to take from that chaloin will be mekayim shlichus. Now he's claiming that he had in mind only the other bag. So the halach is, since the shliach followed the instructions, Balabai is small. The Balabai is small. So you might ask, Vamai, Amr Belibi. He is saying in his heart, he didn't want the bag that the shliach brought. So if Dvarim Shemalev is Yeshlan Dvarim, so then why is the Balabai small? The shliach didn't do shlichus. And Allah Mishum Damrina on Dvarim Shemalev and Dvarim. It must be that the fact that in his heart, the Balabais was thinking that I only want the left bag of money, not the right bag of money, that's invalid. Because his word said, any money that comes from that window. So you have a right, what's the raya? Maybe the reason why we don't say that the shlichus is bottle is because maybe he's lying. Maybe the Baal Habayis is lying when he says I didn't mean bag A, I meant bag B. Maybe he's lying because he didn't want to have to bring the carbon meila. So by saying that you didn't do my shlichus, he's getting out of bringing the carbon. So Gemara, if that's what he was trying to do, he didn't have to say I didn't mean that bag. There's another way he could have avoided bringing the carbon. He could have said, I knew that it was hektish. And we know the halacha is, if you know it's hektish, it's called mezid, and therefore you can't be mechuyev and asham ilos. So then by default, the chiyuv carbon would be on the shliach. Zaktamar na. Well, over Inish, the maf shenaf say rishia. A person, you can't tell me he should have said that. A person doesn't want to say I was amazed, I purposely violated hektish. No one's going to do that to himself. So therefore, I still have the taina. Maybe he only said you have the wrong bag to pot himself from a carbon. So no, because if he wanted to pot himself from a carbon, he should have said something else. He could have said that after I sent you, I remembered that this was some hektish. And the halacha is the Tanya niska balabais vel niska shliach mo. So he doesn't have to say that he was amazed. He has another way that he could get out of bringing the carbon. Yet he chose to say this, that I didn't mean this bag, I meant that bag. And the halacha is we don't believe. So you have a right from here, that's not because you don't believe him, it's because dvarim shabalav einam dvarim. And that's the maskana, or the makar of dvarim shabalav einam dvarim, is from the case of Me'ilah. As Rav Chisda, Harving and learning in the Bismillah Rav Huna, came to that conclusion. Zok Gemara. So in the first case that we discussed, he just sold his nechasim, but he didn't speak out that he's doing it to go to Eretz Yisrael. He told us afterwards that was his das. So that's the Dvarim Shabalev Einam Dvarim. But what if he said, the reason why I'm selling these nechasim is only because I want to move to Eretz Yisrael. So now it's much more clear. Now it's not Dvarim Shabalev anymore. Solik, and he went to Eretz Yisrael, but he couldn't find an apartment, or it was too expensive him to live there. For whatever reason, he couldn't settle there and then come back. Amar Rava says, called the Salik Adaita Lemedar. When he said, I'm going to go to Eretz Yisrael, it doesn't mean I'm just going to go. It means I'm planning to live there. For Halayisterle, Lamaisa, he didn't settle there, and therefore the Mechira would be bottled. The Mechira would be bottled. But Ikadami, those who learned Adaita Lemezik Vasolik, he went up. He couldn't settle there, but he went up. So the Tanai was fulfilled, the Mecher is Kai. Who garbage of Ninul Nixay Adaita Lemaisak L'Eretz Yisrael. Same story. He sold his Nechasim and he spoke out, it's because I'm going to Eretz Yisrael. L'Seif Loy sold it. It ended up that he ended up not going to Eretz Yisrael because on the way there was some type of obstacle that he didn't want to go around, and therefore he aborted his trip. Does he get his land back? Amar Bashi, he sold it. He could have went up. Yes, there was a second there, but he could have went around. He could have found some way to get to Israel if he wanted to. So since it was his choice not to go, it's not mevatel sale. Igad Amri, it's Beloshan Bitmiyah. Iboila, couldn't he have went up if he would have wanted to? Which seems to be saying the same thing, that since he could have went up and he chose not to go up, it's still going to be a mecher. What's the difference between these two lashonos? So you know where it makes an afkamina? If there was an oynish that occurred on the way that made him turn back. If you learn like the first shot that if he wanted, he could have went up, then you'll say it's still a mecher. Because yes, there was an oynish b'derech that he didn't plan for, but he still could have come up with a plan B. He could have went into ways and he could have found some other way to get up. And since with a Tirchi Yisera, he can get up there to Yisrael, and he didn't, it's still considered his choice not to go, and the Mecher is going to be cut. But the second shot is, couldn't he have went? That makes it sound like he could have went with ease. And therefore, if there was a Sakana that showed up on the way, now he cannot no longer go up with ease. That, in fact, would be Mevatel and Mecher. Kavalti. Zog the Henry Mishnah Vayter. Ha'omer l'shlucha. Say the Kadesh li Isha Plainis b'mokum Plain. Go be Mekadosh Rivka for me in Toronto. For Halach v'kitcha b'mokum Macher. He met her in Florida and he was Mekadosh for that. Eino Mekodeshes. There it's not a good Kiddushin. He has a Hakpada Dafka that it should be done in Toronto and not in Florida. And as Rashi speaks out on the first wide line, the dafke ka'amrle mokum ploini. Why does he dafka want this place? Why does he dafka want the Kiddushin to be in Toronto? Because I have a lot of friends in Toronto. And if someone's going to badmouth me to her to convince her to reject the Kiddushin, they'll argue with him, say that's not true what you're saying bad about him. It's absolutely not true. And that'll salvage the marriage. But if you are Mekadosh in any other city and someone badmouths me to her in that other city, I will have no way to salvage this marriage. So he was very insistent that the marriage should occur bedavka in that place. And therefore, the kitchen b'machamacher ain't mekadosh. What about if he says, please be Mekadosh Rivka for me? I believe she's in Toronto now. Harei b'makom ploini. The kitchen b'machamacher, and he ended up finding her in Florida, then I raised him Mekadoshes. Because there he wasn't saying, I bedavka want to marry to be in Toronto. He was just Maramokam Eloi. He was just telling her where you can currently find her. We learned the same halacha legabigit. Why is it possible? By Gershon, we're going to see in a minute. What if we just Maramokam Eloi? You need this halacha by Kiddushin and by Gershon. Why? If we only had our Mishnah, then I would say the Mokim to the Kurvakasi in a place where he's trying to marry her, trying to bring her close. In the city that I specified, Toronto, they like me there. They won't speak ill about me over there. But the High Asra, but in the other city where I didn't want you to go, sunnily, they don't like me there. And Mamli Mili, they're going to speak about me. By get, I'm not trying to attract her. I'm throwing her out. I don't give two hoots where you give the get. Just get rid of her for me. But if I only knew Salach about Gershon, I would have said, it happens to be a little bit embarrassing. When someone gives a get, it's an embarrassing thing. You're not interested in publicizing it. So he picked a city where maybe not so many people know him, and he won't be the flavor of the week. So that's where he wanted to get to occur. But B'hai Asra, I didn't want it to be right in my community where everyone's going to be talking about me. So maybe there's Akpada. But by Kiddushin, maybe he doesn't care where the Kiddushin is done. That's why we need a Mishnah in Kiddushin over here to tell us the halacha. We also had a Mishnah in Gershon that tells us the same halacha. Person was Makadosh a woman and he made a t'nai amanas that you're not restricted by any nedarim that you may have made. It turns out there are nedarim. She's restricted. The halacha is any mekudeshes because the t'nai was mevatel this Kiddushin. What about Kontastam? He didn't speak out, I don't want to have nedarim, but everybody knows no person wants to marry a wife who's restricted. And for him to learn nedarim, the halacha is he can give her a divorce, but shaloi biksu. Teisha shaloi biksu. And we're going to see that what it means is Teisha shaloi biksu is could be me'ikra din, it's not a Kiddushin. But since he didn't speak it out, and why me'ikra is not a Kiddushin? Because it's not Varm Shabbat, it's an umdana that nobody wants to marry a woman who has restrictions on. However, the Rabbanim were mechayiv a get, but if a zoyvait, and we wouldn't be mechayiv him to pay for a ksuba. How about Amanash ain't no woman? What if he said Amanash that she has no physical moment? And it turns out that she had physical problems. Ain't a mikudesh, she would have been mikudesh. The same thing. We have an umda, he would have won her. Therefore, teitzel b'ksuba. Now there are those who take the shin out, and they just say kol hamumin apostle b'kayanim. Any mum that would pass l'koy, apostle b'dashim would pass a woman would make him be able to divorce her. The shekel is a little bit difficult to understand. The reason why it's teitzel b'ksuba because mumin that pass l'koy pass l'noshim, that's a little difficult. So if you take the shin out, it's a little easier to read. Kol hamumin apostle b'kayanim, apostle b'dashim, and in fact, it's not all mumin that apostle b'kayanim. It's only women that make her look weird. But Tananami Gabiksubis, Yagav. This Mishnah tells us halacha Mugabi Kiddushin that the Kiddushin is bottled if there's a Tanai made, and if the Tanai wasn't made, it tells us halacha that you can divorce her, but it also tells you a Chiddush in Hilchos Ksubis that you don't have to pay. This same Mishnah is cited in Maseches Ksubis. Hacha Kiddushin is tzricha. Here, the main reason why it's quoted here, the Mishnah is the halacha regarding the Kiddushin. But once it brings up this case, Tana Ksubas on the Kiddushin, it also discusses the halacha of Ksuba, that he doesn't have to pay the Ksuba. But Hasam Ksubas is tzricha. There, it's Meseches Ksubas. So the focus is Meseches Ksubas, Tana Kiddushin, not Ksubas. Zok the Mishnah weiter. Hamakadosh te noshim b'shavar pruta. Someone's a Gal Tziyana. And he says, okay, I need a pruta for Kiddushin, but let me see, maybe I can be Mekadosh two women together with the same Shavar Pruta. Or he tried making Kiddushin on one woman with less than a Shavar Pruta. The halacha is, even though he sent gifts after the Kiddushin, it's normal for the chassan to send his wife gifts. You don't say that the gifts are going to act as a Ma'aseh Kiddushin. The gifts are there because he was Mekadosh already, and therefore Eina Mekudeshes. Shemachlis Kiddushin Rishonim Shalach. The Dairanis, the Savlonis, the presents are not for the Kiddushin. Once he's Mekadosh, he's giving her a gift. But here the Kiddushin was never good because it was Pachos Mishavar Pruta. The Chen Katan Kiddush. The same thing if a Katan made Kiddushin. The Kiddushin of a Katan is nothing. And then if he followed up by sending gifts after he was Bar Mitzvah, it doesn't matter because it's still depending on the original Kiddushin that he made, which was not a valid Kiddushin. We're on Daf Nun Amud Beis. We just finished the Mishnah. We need the Mishnah to tell us in both cases that it's not a good Kiddushin. Say if he tried to be Mekadosh two women with one pruta. Say if he was Mekadosh one woman with a half a pruta. We need the Mishnah to tell us in both cases that it's not a good Kiddushin. The Hashmini Shavar Pruta, I would have thought, I did the Kanofik Mamanamine Toy. Since Lemaisa, from him, he's giving up a full Shavar Pruta. So people will make a mistake, as Rashi says, the Toy V'Sover, they'll think the Kiddushin inu, that it's a good Kiddushin. And therefore, V'Leimasaka Daite, this is V'Loinois L'Shem Kiddushin. There they won't think the Savloinos are L'Shem Kiddushin because there they think that the Kiddushin was a good Kiddushin. But if you try to be Mekadosh a single woman with less than a Shavar Pruta, everybody knows that's not a good Kiddushin. Anyone, maybe you should say, everybody knows there's no way this could be a good Kiddushin. So therefore, the Kiddushin can be shad. Clearly, he's not sending Savlonis because he think he was already Mekadosher, because he knows he wasn't Mekadosh. He knows to use Pachas B'Shavar Pruta. So therefore, the Mishnah needs to tell us that even in the case where it's so clear that he wasn't Mekadosher because the original Kiddushin was less than a Shavar Pruta, nevertheless, we still say that the Savlonis were not L'Shem Pruta. If we know both the case.
If he knows for sure, why is he sending Savlonis?
No, because maybe Hitaka doesn't know. We would think for sure he knows. Kumashla maybe he doesn't know, because the Mishnah says he's only giving the Savlonis because he thinks that he was Mekadosher. Maybe a person taka doesn't chap. Maybe a person taka doesn't chap that less than a Shavar Pruta is not Mekayim Kedusha. Aval Katan Shekidish. That for sure can't be a mistake. Everybody knows the Kiddushin of a Katan is useless. So therefore, maybe since it's so clear to everybody that's for sure the original Ma'aseh Kiddushin was not Toifus, maybe here the Savlonis are L'Shem Kiddushin. Kamash Ulam, that maybe even that people don't know. And therefore, they're only sending the Savlonis because they think that there was already a Kiddushin. Itmar, Rafudu Amar, Choshishin L'Savlonis. What does it mean, Choshishin L'Savlonis? Zok Rashi, Misha Shidach V'Isha. Someone was already discussing the marriage. And after they were discussing the marriage, Vinis Ratza, and they already made up, okay, we're going to do this. And then the Kodam V'Sholach Savlonis V'Edim. And then he sent Savlonis with Edim. Zok to Gemara, Zok Rashi, Choshishin Shema Kedushin. We're Choshin that the gifts that he sent were L'Shem Kedushin. But it's Choshishin. It's not Vava Mekudeshes, it's Choshin. And therefore, if she accepted Kedushin from somebody else after she received the gifts with Edim, Shricha Get Min Harishon, she'll need a get min harishon because we are choshid that she's a neshes. So zok the heilige Gemara. Zok the heilige Gemara. Funa itmar. Funa amar choshim shavloinos. V'chein amar rabba choshim shavloinos. Amar rabba. Zok rabba umoisvinen hashmait. And we have a kasher from this halacha to our Gemara. Zok the Gemara. Afal pi sheshalach shavloinos. La'achamikan. Our Mishnah says, even though the man sent to the woman gifts after this faulty Kiddushin, ain't a Mekudeshes. It's not Mekudeshes. So if it's not Mekudeshes, you have a right that we're not Choshid, that's Sevloinis Hashem Kiddushin. Amalei Abaye Zakabai, what's the kasha? Hashem Kiddukatani Taima. The Mishnah says the reason why these Sevloinis in our Mishnah are not Hashem Kiddushin. Because Shemachmas Kiddushin are Rishonim Shalach. It's because he's sending the gifts because he thinks he already made a Kiddushin. But in a case where he never made a Kiddushin, they just smoothed about getting married and they sent the Savlonius first, there you take a Choshid that it's the same Kiddushin. The Rashi Hazam Kedekatani Taima, the Toy, the Kiddushin Kamoi. They think that the first Kiddushin was valid, the Samachalai, and he's relying on that and he's just giving Savlonius afterwards. Here we have a person who just discussed marriage, but he didn't make a Kiddushin. And the first thing he did was sense of linus. There, we have to be choshid that it's l'shem kedushin. Ikadamri, I'm a rabbi. We know law. How do I know that choshid l'shem kedushin? So instead of starting off with a kasha from our Mishnah, fakert, we're starting off with a raya from our Mishnah. Kidekatani taima, shemach was kedushin harishonim shalach. The Baal the Mishnah says, why by us is it not a good kedushin in our Mishnah? Oshkoyach. Why by us is it not a good kedushin in our Mishnah? Is because machmas kedushin harishonim shalach. So therefore, chacha who the toy dafki in the case of our Mishnah, where there's a mistake, he thinks he had an original kedushin. There you say the Savlonians are not l'shem kedushin. Haba alma, but in a regular case, heicha the shalach v'loy kedushin. If he never made kedushin on her, he's tamazoi sent her Savlonians have a kedushin. We have to be choshen that it's a kedushin, which is exactly what Rabbi said. Abaye, let me buy come. And the Abaye says, no, you don't have a raya from our Mishnah that normally Savloni shechoshes l'kedushin. Because lo mi buy ba'alma. It's pashit in a regular case, where this was the first thing that he said. There was no kedushin involved. They never did kedushin. He was never thinking of kedushin. We never discussed kedushin. Where's kedushin? Eventually, we're going to get married, but there was never an actual kedushin in the discussion. Still, over there is pashut that the Savlonians are not l'shem kedushin, and you don't have to be choshes. The Mishnah is a bigger chiddush. The nachas look kedushin. We already know he wanted to marry her because he already said I read kedushin. He just didn't do it right. So maybe ema have a kedushin. Maybe in the Mishnah's case it should be considered a kedushin, and it's the second attempt to make the kedushin.
We should make it.
Ema have a kedushin. Kamash for law. I'm sorry.
Maybe it means we should make it.
How could we make it into a kedushin if that's not his task?
Yeah, it is. He wants to get married. He did something. He wasn't. The initial maybe.
Well, we can't make it magic. But let's see Rashi. Chashina. I'm sorry. Here he tried making a kedushin, but he used pachas mishabapruta, or he was a cut. Since he was planning to make a kedushin, but maybe even niskar shein kedushin of klum, maybe after he made the kedushin, he had hey, my kedushin was useless. And then the shalach was of loinus, he sold the presents after that. Ema l'shem kedushin. Maybe when he sent those of loinus, he sent them l'shem kedushin. Kamash lo our Mishnah did not. He sent the of loinus because he still thinks his original kedushin was a good kedushin. So mahabel, we have over here machloikis. Rabbi holds you need to be choshish l'shem loinus, and the Bible says you don't have to be choshish l'shem loinus. Amar Papa, but after the mekachi v'adam misavli in a city where the norm is that first he makes kedushin and only then does he send presents. Then you say chashina. There you're choshid. Why? Because if presents have been given, we're choshid that there was not that the presents are the kedushin. We're choshid that he had already made kedushin. We just didn't see it because from the fact that he said things of loinus, he must have already made it. Zok Rashi chashina the kivin or chayu l'kedusha bereisha chashina the shoder hani l'shem kedusha. So Rashi says not like Rashi says that since normally you do kedusha first, if this is the first thing he sent, we'll say this was the Kiddushin. With the pshat that I said, I mixed it up. That was Tosfos. Tosfos says what I said. Your choshes here had already made Kiddushin. But Rashi is no. Since the norm is to make Kiddushin first before presents, so what is any presents for? It must be that the presents are Kiddushin. Chashina. But in the place of Mesavli, Vada Mikdashi, in a place where you first send presents and then you make Kiddushin, so then like Chashina. Why would we be Choshed for Kiddushin? It's normal to give presents before the Kiddushin. Frektamar Makachi, Vada Mesavli Pshita. Why do I need this Kiddush? If it's a place where they make Kiddushin first and then they give presents, it's Pashut that this must be L'Shem Kiddushin. The Ruba of Mikdashi Vada Mesavli. Most people in this city first are Makadosh and then they give gifts. But Umita Misavli Vada Mikdashi. There's a meet of people who will give gifts before. So you might think you're Choshesh L'Miyuta, and therefore we'll say it's not a Kiddushin. Kamash V'lo that you're Choshesh L'Kiddushin because you follow the Roiv, and the Roiv would not have given gifts before Kiddushin, so it must be that the gift is Kiddushin. What happens if Huchzuk Shtar Suba B'Shul? Mahu. What does that mean, Dr. Rashi? Sharo Shtar Suba. There was a Shtar Suba that was written that everybody knows from Yankiv to Roch. So we are going to have to assume that they're married because normally Suba is given after Kiddushin. So therefore, what's the maybe we have to be choshed at least that she's a Mekudeshes. Ma'u in Niskat Shalachar. What if she ended up taking Kiddushin from somebody else, not Yankel from the Ksuba? Ma'u lachlikach k'Mekudeshes to Rishon. We have to be choshed that she's Mekudeshes to the man who she has a Ksuba from, or who we found the Ksuba from, because a Ksuba is only written when there's a marriage. Amar Lei. So he answered back. Who's asking the kasha? Who's asking the shayla to who? Ravacha is asking Ravuna. So Ravuna answered the chi. Oh, that's Rav. Ravacha was asking Rav. So Rav answered, Amalei the chi mipnei shemachzik star ksuba b'shuk. But because there's a star floating around in the shuk, nachzik bak eshishish. So now we have to be worried that she's an eshishish. That doesn't make sense. So my havelah, my what halach? Amar Rashi depends. But after the mikdashi the kasvik ksuba in a place where you never write a ksuba before a woman is mukadeshes, the chashinan, the fact that there's a star ksuba out there, it's not possible that this would ever gotten written unless there was a kedushin in it. But if it's kasvik the mikdashi, but if it's a place where they write the ksuba first, and only then do they make the kedushin, then loy chashinan, just because there's a ksuba around, lav dafka, there was a kedushin. We're not done with giving it, we're writing it, because they just found the paper out. Yeah, we write ksuba before the marriage, we write it by the chusin stish, but he doesn't give it to her until after the kedushin.
Right, but he doesn't give it after the kedushin also. And he gives it right by the.
He gives it right after the kedushin.
Right, but the reason is because Machtam is sick.
But the shaila is it possible that someone will pre-write it? That's really the shaila. Is it possible that it was pre-written and he lost it, and just because it's there, this mind is just to give in a condition. That is the right. That's the shaila. So Zok Gemara, if it's a place to make the shiva the kisvi tshuva, in other words, chashina, because they would have never even written it if it wasn't already a kedushin. But kisvi v'ader mikdashi, then like chashina. But if it's a place where it's normal to write it even for the kedushin, it's not a right. Zok Gemara, mikdashi v'ader kasi pshita. If you never write a ksuba until the kedushin, so what's the shaila? Zok Gemara, tricha to lashich schafar. Speaking in the case where normally you write kedushin and then you write. But here, this city, there weren't seifrim around. It was really hard to find a seifrim. So my detayim is safru disrami. Here, let's be choshen that even though normally you don't write a ksuba before the kedushin, here you choshen that he did. You know why? Because he knew it would be very hard to find a sefer. And before his kedushin, he found the sefer. So he found the sefer. He said, let me write the ksuba quickly now so that I'll have it available. So therefore, maybe in this city, you don't have to be choshen that there's a kedushin. Kamash v'lan that you're not choshen for those things, and you go bust it around. Gewaltig. Zog the Heilige Mishnah. Hamakadosh isha ubita. Someone who's makadosh simultaneously b'vasachas.
The chash is if he's going to be makadosh another woman, if that's what the
No. If she was makabel kedushin from another man,
And then
Do you say she's a nation shish already?
and
so-
she can't be Makabel, or she needs to get what
That will be the shaila. The shaila will be if she was makabel kedusha from another man, will she need a get from the Rishon?
you need to get. If she's a Aisha Zish, then that's not tough.
Right. Well, at the moment to suffer. I don't think we're going to say vada ish because you're going to be choshen. I think it's a choshen. I don't think there's an assumption that she's a vada ish. Let's see if it's a Rashi speaks to a farish. Im nisgacha la'acher ma'u lachzika k'mekudeshes l'rishon. So lachzika is mashma vada. Maybe the shaila vada.
And that means
Because the earlier case was only choshen, you need to get. But Rashi is saying lachzika.
in this market, it's not going to be tough.
You wouldn't even need to get in the shame. Yeah. Someone was Mekadesh, a mother and daughter ka'achas. Now we know it's chiv krisos and kedusha is not toifus. The halach is einan mekudashos. It won't work. It will not work. Ka'achas. He said, Amar harei shteichem mekudashos li. He did it. He wanted to do both kedushins simultaneously. Einan mekudashos of Rashi. Ve'ein achas mehen tzricha get. Neither needs a get. Uvegamor mafarish time and wine. Okay. Umay said there was a story. With 5 women, and amongst these 5 women, there were 2 sisters. Someone picked a big basket full of dates. I'm sorry, tainim are figs. It actually belonged to them. And Rashi says the Gemara is going to elaborate on this case. And there was a Shemitah year. And with this basket of figs, he said, he made one big communal kedushin. And one of these 5 women accepted the te'enim on behalf of everybody else. Although everybody else might be mikudeshes, neither of these 2 sisters are mikudeshes. No, there's 2 sisters.
Yeah, that's okay. Why are the other? Yes.
I don't know. The Gemara is going to. Rashi tells us that the Gemara is going to tell us what the chiddush of Shoshvi's Haisa. So I guess we'll see the case later. I didn't see the Gemara yet on it. So let's see what the Gemara says. How do you know that if you try to be mekadesh 2 arayos together, that neither one will be typhus? Amar Rami b'Chamad Amar Kra. The pasuk is v'isha el achoisa loy sikach litzvar, and Rashi tells us that the Gemara is having now is that this pasuk is exactly speaking about such a case when you try to marry together at one point at one time b'vasachas 2 sisters. Hatayr Amra b'shah shenasu tzara zulazu, in a case where simultaneously while you're marrying them they're becoming tzara zulazu lo yehei lo lekuchim afilu ba'achas mahem. Kedusha wouldn't even be chal even on one of them. And as Rashi says, only at this point in the Gemara we think the krabach iksiv. The pasuk is directly speaking about a case when you were trying to be mekadesh 2 sisters the vasachas. The Amar there the Torah says loy sikach, meaning ein loch behen lukuchen, the kedusha won't be chal.
The word letzal also means like an ability.
Yeah.
By Mishnah.
Okay. So that's also mashma that it's vasachas. I hear. Amalei Rava, ihachi. If that's how you're going to learn, Rashi the krab of vasachas ksiv. If you're going to tell me that that's what the Torah is referring to, heichi mechayev karis in Baalei. How could you be mechayev karis if you're Baalei? Since the Kiddushin was not called on either one of them, so then why, if you were born, either one would be in this chayiv karis? You're not married. That's right. He's not married to either one of them. Ella Amar Rava, the pasuk must be speaking b'zeh chazeh. Ella kra b'zeh chazeh. The pasuk must be b'zeh chazeh. Shebi Kiddushin harishayna he ishtay. The first sister is his wife. The Ka'amar, and then the Torah says, and Kiddushin toifsin b'chayisa. A, Sai Kiddushin is not toifsin b'chayisa, and B, even ba'ala al shkaris. So how does our Mishnah know that the vasachas, neither one is chal? So Gemara, we know it from a different halacha, from a svara that Rabbi taught us. Masnisen could the Rabbi, the Omer Rabbi, kol she'eni b'zachar zeh, any chalois that cannot happen, zachar zeh, afilu b'vasach hasein, won't be chal even b'vasachas. Zok Rashi, umasnisen ki hayunami b'vasachas mehai kranafki. We talk and know even in the case of b'vasachas, the Kiddushin, both Kedushin wouldn't be chal, and we know it from the pasuk that Asher's b'zachar zeh. Uchederabba, because we're using the svar of Rabba, usvar ba'omi, that kol she'ene b'zachar zeh. Anytime you can't have two things chal one after the other, afilu b'vasachas eina, it won't be chal b'vasachas. It's either hilchach even the b'chayis isha letafsa kedushin, since once he's married to one sister, he can know there's no tefisa kedushin for the second sister. He could shini b'vasachas even if he was mekadosh both sisters simultaneously. Nami lahava kedushin. Gewaltig. Stop here and Mishnah will run to time.
Are you giving a shia?